So before we move on to the next part, let's review our special right triangles. So we have 30, 60, 90. So in a 30, 60, 90, across from the 30 is the 1, across from the 60 is the root 3, and then the hypotenuse is 2. Okay. And if you forget these, you can just do Pythagorean theorem to check. 1 squared plus root 3 squared, that's 1 plus 3, which is 4. Square root of that is 2. Okay. Now, we are going to be in radians for the most part. So remember, 30 degrees, that is pi over 6. Okay, because that's 180 over 6. Where 60 is pi over 3. And then 90, that's pi over 2. 180 over 2 is 90. 180 over 3, 60. Okay. Now for a 45, 45, 90, both of the legs are 1. Since the angles are equal, the sides are equal. And then the hypotenuse is root 2. And again, this is probably the one that people mislabel the most. They'll put a 2 here. You can always check your sides. 1 squared plus 1 squared is 2. Square root of it, root 2. Okay, so we are going to use these special right triangles to find trig values when I give you the angle measure. And before we do that, remember 45 degrees. That is pi over 4. 180 over 4 would be 45 degrees. Okay, so to find the following value, let's just start with a basic one. Sine of 60 degrees. So 60 degrees, that is in quadrant 1. Okay, so here's 60 degrees. I'm going to close my triangle. My reference angle is also 60 degrees because it is 60 degrees away from the x-axis. So then I don't usually fill everything in. I'm going to on this, at least this first one. So here we have a 30, 60, 90. So across from the 60, that's the root 3 because 60 is the bigger angle. Across from the 30 is the 1. The hypotenuse is 2. Now to find sine, that's opposite over hypotenuse. And remember, we are always working from the reference angle. So the opposite side is root 3. The hypotenuse is 2. So sine of 60 degrees will be root 3 over 2. Okay. Now we're going to switch to radians and move out of the first quadrant. Okay, so we have cosine of 5 pi over 4. So first you need to figure out where the angle is. So 5 pi over 4, that is 1 and 1/4. Okay, so this is 1, 1/4 more will keep me in the third quadrant. 1/4 isn't more than a half, so it's not going to push me past the y-axis. So I'm going to draw my triangle here. My reference angle is pi over 4. Okay, which is 45 degrees. Okay, remember 1/4 is what's left over, that's less than a half, so that's my reference angle. So this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So I can label these as 1, 1, root 2. Okay, so even though the angle 5 pi over 4, that would be like 225 degrees, that's too big for the angle measure of a triangle. Okay, but I can create a triangle out of that angle with the reference angle. That's why we spent so much time finding reference angles. So what happens though now we're thinking about this graphically, okay? If I were to describe this point, it's to the left and it's down. So that would make that x coordinate -1, so this would be a -1. This would also be a -1. And then your hypotenuse, that's always the distance from the origin to here. That hypotenuse will always be positive. So what happens as you move out of the first quadrant, some of the side lengths of your triangles are going to be negative. And remember, negative just indicates direction. It's not a negative distance. That just means I went left or down to get to that point. Okay, so that's why both of these are negative. Your hypotenuse will always be positive. It'll never be negative. So once you've drawn your triangle, that's the first thing that we're going to look for, is that you have a triangle in the correct quadrant, drawn correctly and accurately labeled. Okay, then you find the ratio. Okay, and we always work from the reference angle. So cosine, that's adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's -1 over root 2, and then we want to rationalize. So that'll be -root 2 over 2. Now let's look at another one. This time we're going in the negative direction. So -7 pi over 6, that's -1 and 1/6. So negative 1 will get me here, 1/6 more will keep me in the second quadrant. So that means my reference angle is pi over 6, since 1/6 is less than a half. Okay. So pi over 6, this is like our 30-degree angle. Okay. So across from the 30 is the 1, and this is positive because this side length is up. Okay. This would be the 60 degree, so this is going to be the √3. But since this side length is to the left, that's going to make this a negative √3. Always think about it, if this was a point right here, what would the signs of your x and y coordinates be? You would have a negative x, a positive y, and then our hypotenuse will be 2. Okay, so we want your triangle completely labeled. If you leave off the reference angle, that's fine. I typically, once I've done a few of these, I usually don't write down the reference angle, I just label the sides, but write the reference angle for as long as you need to if it helps. Okay. So now we're finding cotangent. Cotangent is adjacent over hypotenuse. So from here, we're always measuring from the reference angle, which is the one at the origin and the x-axis. Okay. Adjacent is negative √3 over the opposite, which is 1. So that'll be negative √3. Now for number 5, we have 11 pi over 6. Okay, so you always worry about the angle first, graph it, then figure out your ratio. So secant of 11 pi over 6, this is 1 and 5/6. So this is 1 pi, 5/6 more is going to push me past the y-axis into the fourth quadrant. Then I'm always going to close my triangle to the x-axis. My reference angle, again, is going to be a pi over 6, so 30 degrees. So across from the 30 is the 1. It's going to be negative because this side length is down. So this side will be the √3. It's positive because it's to the right. And then this will be 2. Okay, so for every single problem, we're checking for your triangle and then the answer. Okay. So then here, secant goes with cosine. Okay, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So from the reference angle, from right here, I'm going to do hypotenuse over the adjacent, which is √3, and then I'm going to rationalize. So that'll be 2 √3 over 3. Now let's look at 1 in degrees again. So we've got negative 150. So it's going to be in the second quadrant, we're going this way. So we're 30 degrees short of 180, so that makes my reference angle 30 degrees again. Okay, so across from the 30 is the 1. Again, it's going to be negative because it's down. The adjacent side is going to be √3. My hypotenuse is positive 2. Hypotenuses are always positive. Then cosecant. Cosecant goes with sine. Sine from the reference angle is opposite over hypotenuse, so cosecant is going to be 2 over negative 1, which would just be negative 2. Then tangent. Tangent of 11 pi over 3. So this one is more than one rotation. So I'm going to go ahead, 3 goes into 11 3 times with 2 left over. So this angle, this is 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 2/3 more is going to put me in the fourth quadrant. So my angle's in the fourth quadrant. Again, I'm always closing my triangle to the x-axis. Okay. My reference angle is going to be pi over 3. This is more than a half, so it's going to be the difference, the 1/3. So pi over 3, that's 60 degrees. So across from the 60 is the √3. It'll be negative because it's down. This adjacent side right here will be the 1, positive because it's to the right. And then the hypotenuse is 2. Okay. Now tangent, remember always work from the reference angle, is opposite over adjacent. So that's negative √3 over 1. So that'll just be a negative √3 for tangent.